All right, so we're back, class, and for this video I'm just going to show you really quickly how to render in iRay. So if we go up to Mode and Rendering iRay, iRay is very similar to Arnold in that it is an interactive photorealistic renderer. A couple things to note: as you open up iRay, it's going to automatically start rendering to your settings. So I'm going to pause the rendering for a moment while I get my settings all nice and fixed. By default, I think the max time is set to like 20. But obviously, once we get all of our settings done, we're going to crank up the max time that it takes to render, because that will give our render more quality. So I like to render at like 300 seconds at a minimum. Let's see. There's a viewport resolution, so this is the setting for what quality or what size you want your render to be. So I've got mine set to 3840 by 2160, but you can change the size of these at any time. I'm also right now, while I'm playing with settings, going to turn off override viewport resolution, and then I'll turn it on again before we do the final render. All right, a couple more things. I'd like to click on this display settings button. And what this is going to do is give us some environmental settings that we can play around with. And I'm going to click this. So the first thing is our environment map. This is like our HDRI, high dynamic range image, that we can turn on and off. It gives us light. So this Bonifacio Street is a very yellow light, and you can see that my model, actually I don't have, let me turn on iRay rendering again. Here we go. So turn that back on. Just make sure it's at a low setting. Maybe my max time will be 10 seconds. Okay, so now let's go back to our environment or display settings. And you can see here now I can toggle between my environments. And this is going to give me both my background picture as well as lighting from this scene. And we can also turn off this background picture in a minute. So don't worry, find the right color that you're looking for with the lighting. So if I have a very orangey scene, it's going to turn my model very orange. If I have something with more blue, or in this case green, that's going to give me a different style of lighting. So play around with these. Definitely check out. Some of these are really fun, like the Studio 80. That kind of gives you a really cool reflections if you have some. So I'm going to stick with this for right now. Studio 80's horror flick. You can change your environmental exposure, so how bright or dark this is. So I kind of recommend keeping it somewhere near default. You can also change the rotation of your scene. So if you want to move your map around, you can see that's giving me some cool effects too, especially when it comes to these reflections. So that's environment rotation. And then we've got dome. So for this particular scene, sphere with the ground is fine. You can also do infinite sphere. So that is going to remove the ground option for it, which is kind of interesting. It may give you better options for underneath rendering your model. But let's see, I'm going to turn that back on, sphere with ground. You can change the size of your sphere. And then here is where you can change your background. So if you don't want whatever is in the scene to show, you can actually create a clear color and maybe change this to like black. And then I can have a black background for my model while keeping all of the real-time lighting information from the scene. So again, that's clear color, and I do wish that had a different name to it. All right, a few more things you can play around with. Camera settings, you can play with the field of view. Focal length could be really interesting. Focus distance can make things out of blur, or make things blurry in the background. A few more things. Scroll all the way down. So that's the display settings. You can also play with shader settings. If you turned on emissive, you can play with your emissive intensity here. So that could be also something that you'd like to play with. So now that I'm happy, this is a pretty basic scene, but I think it's kind of interesting to have that black background. So I'm going to go back and actually render out a decent looking frame. So I'm going to turn back my max time. How about I'll give it 60 seconds this time. You should probably give yours 300 seconds. I'm also going to override my viewport resolution so I have that 4K size. I can hold down Option, right click and drag to make my model bigger or smaller in the scene. I can hold down Option and middle mouse, and that will allow me to pan. And then I'm just going to make this a little bigger here. All right. So for this, I'm going to wait 60 seconds, and then once it's done, I'm going to hit Save Render. That's really important. So make sure you're saving your renders as you go along. And then I'll probably do a few different looks with a few different backgrounds. All right, so please go ahead and save your renders and give that a shot. Let me know if you have questions. All right, thanks, class.